So hello, Stitch. How have you been?
Oh, I've been good. I'm here on lockdown at the MGM. Got a show tonight. I've been here since Thursday, literally in complete isolation, and I'll do the show tonight and I'll go home because I live like 20 minutes from here. But outside of that, I'm not complaining, bro. I'm glad to be working and I'm glad to be doing these fights on ESPN. So, and then talking to you,
Yeah,
Jake, that's my name too. Jake and
yeah,
Jake, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Jacob Duran. Yeah.
yeah, that's me, man.
Yeah. And how was it at the start of the pandemic for you? Was you like having a nice break from everything?
Yeah, well, yeah, all this crazy thing. I mean, I was fortunate enough that before we went on lockdown, I had some big fights. I worked with KSI, worked with Anson Gibb. I did some world championship fights. I finished up with Tyson Fury. So economically, it set me okay. And I was actually in New York to work with Shakir Stevenson. And that was March the 12th is when I got into New York. The fights were at the Garden. So they said the fights were going to continue, just no audience. And then Friday morning they called and said, "No, the fights have been canceled." And from there on, man, I flew home, and the pandemic hit New York pretty bad. So I left at a
Hmm.
good time, and I was on lockdown until Brad Jacobs from Top Rank called me, and he says that they were going to be doing 13 shows in 6.5 weeks, and they could only allow, because of the COVID, they could allow one fighter and two trainers. Normally it's a team. So
Hmm.
they brought me and Mike Basil in as the house cutmen. Uh, so I spent six and I tested and do the fights Tuesday and do the fight Thursday, and Thursday night I'd go home for a couple of days. Did that for 6 weeks. These fights here are every week, so it's one fight a week, which is fine. So I get to stay home, spend some time with my wife, and just kind of relax.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice. It's nice to still be working, but like you say, it's hard with how the world is at the moment because you've got to stay away from everyone in that little bubble, like you said.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I mean, guys like you, like well, just everybody. And I mentioned earlier before we got on that yesterday they had news where the MGM properties, where I'm staying at, but all the properties are going to lay off like 18,000 employees just because of what's going on right now. But guys like you, that you're off work, and it makes it economically difficult for people, and that's. To me, that's what's heartbreaking. I've been blessed, and then I got a residual check from the Creed. I got a couple checks from the Creed movie. So I've been fortunate. I'm one of the lucky ones, and continue doing what I love doing, and that's working fights.
Yeah, yeah. And that was one of the things I wanted to chat to you about was the Creed movies and participating in the Rocky Balboa films as well. It's like an iconic film throughout the world. How was it when you first heard about it? Like, what was your feelings when they rang you up or however they got in touch to tell you or ask you, do you want to be part of the film?
Yeah, well, the first one, good question. The first one was Balboa. Joe Cortez, which is a Hall of Fame referee, was the referee in the movie. But I guess Sylvester Stallone says, "Hey, man, can you get some people, cutmen and all that?" So he gave me a call and says, "Hey, look, man, there's a movie going on, and we're filming here in Las Vegas. Sylvester Stallone but at that time, I had a world title fight that I was working in Paris, France, with Fabrice Tiozzo from France. And then the week after, I was going to London. I was going to work with Audley Harrison. Now, Audley Harrison was a gold medalist heavyweight. But when I got that call, I told Joe I couldn't do it because I had those fights already committed, right? So I called my wife at work and explained to her the situation. She goes, "Are you crazy?" Because you have to do it. Rocky's an American icon, right? So I thought about it, man. I mean, I'm in my computer, Jake. I'm sending Audley Harrison's people. We're going through the tidbits, the flights and the cost and what have you not. We're going through all that, and I just kind of had the computer for like 10 minutes, and finally I deleted the message, and I sent him a message that I had just been offered a movie opportunity with Sylvester Stallone, and of course they supported it, and it turns out that the fights in France got canceled anyway.
Hmm.
So it was a blessing, and to work with Sylvester Stallone, to see his action, his work actually, because I've been a big fan of his, but he actually wrote, directed, and acted in Balboa, and tremendous, a genius of what he did. So yeah, somebody in my position to play myself in a Rocky movie is, it's unexpected and unbelievable. But then to get called to do Creed 1 and Creed 2 was remarkable, because now I've done 3 movies with Sylvester Stallone, and of course 2 with Michael B. Jordan, and of course one of your English guys, Tony Bello. You know, so I've been blessed, brother.
And how was it doing that film? Because obviously I've heard some stories, and I think there's a video that came out recently of Tony Bellew actually apparently knocking out Michael B. Jordan. What is that rumors true?
Yeah, it wasn't apparent. He dropped him like a hot tomato. Well, you know, it just, you know, it happened. You know, and the thing with Tony did a great job. You know, being that it was first time acting. But the thing with Michael B. Jordan is he wanted to make everything as authentic, and that was one of the sacrifices that he had to put on the table. I mean, you can't reduplicate that fall that he fell. It was just, it was unbelievable, you know, and so, yeah, that happened. You know, it was fun.
Yeah, it's great to be a part of such an iconic film, and it's going to go down in history, and you can always say that you were part of that.
Yeah, of course, you know, I mean, just, you know, and the thing about it is, you know, my background, Jake, is, you know, I grew up as a farm worker here in California. You know, I literally all my life till I joined the military, I was picking fruits, vegetables, and working in the agricultural business as I got older. So I come from a small town, so I'm a little guy. I'm just a normal guy, right, that has had these opportunities to work with the greatest fighters in the world in boxing, MMA, and to be in movies, you know. So, but I'm always that little kid that grew up, and, you know, I never forget where I come from.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously you've been doing this for a long time as well.
Yeah.
How long would you say you've been a cutman for?
Well, you know, before I was a cutman, I was a trainer. Before I was a trainer, actually, I was studying the martial arts, and so that progression. But being a cutman per se, because I had my own school of kickboxing, and you know, now you're stationed where? Where are you from in the UK?
I'm in Oxford.
Okay, because as it turns out, he was a student instructor. I studied in Thailand when I was in the military. I was in the Air Force in 1974, and I saw my first Muay Thai fight, and so there I started training the martial arts. But one of the student instructors was Master Ken, and it turns out that now we were like brothers Ken. We were about the same age, and his brother was one of the master instructors, and this other Mr. Wana. But I ran into Master Ken years later in California, and we're friends again. You know, we communicate all the time. But he lives in Manchester, so he is one of the guys to introduce Muay Thai to the UK, and so it's nice to go back and spend a little bit of time with him.
Yeah, I bet. So obviously getting into...
I'm sorry, but getting into a cutman, I had my own school of kickboxing, so I was a trainer. Of course, I was a manager, promoted, but I had to learn to be a cutman because of the economics. Plus, I wanted to learn all aspects of the game and understand. And so, I've been here in Las Vegas 26 years. I've been working as a cutman 35 years.
Okay. And is that where you started then? Was you started to do Muay Thai fights is where you began your cutman career?
Yeah, well, no, actually, you know, kickboxing was just getting started in the States. You know, it wasn't as big as it is in the UK now and as it is in Europe. It just wasn't, right? But it was a martial arts because first I started in Taekwondo. There was Koreans there. I didn't know the difference. Taekwondo, Thailand, same shit to me, right? But then they left like 3 months later and the Thais came in, and then I understood the difference in styles. But we applied a lot of the Taekwondo techniques to the Muay Thai, power and speed, you know. So with that, but when I got to the Bay Area out of the military, I got into boxing to improve my hands. And from there, I started training amateur fighters. And then I opened up my own school of kickboxing, was just like a credit card. And from there, the rest was history.
And was it always something that you was interested in ever since you was young, like combat sports and like kickboxing and stuff like that?
Never. It was non-existent where I grew up. Okay. You know, it was, like I say, I was in a small town, and of course, you know, I would see the Friday night fights with, you know, we only had one TV. Now this is going back, you know, so we all watched the same thing, and of course, my father would watch the Tuesday night fights or Friday night fights, but I was really not an aficionado, and that, and kickboxing was even less. But it's something I fell in love with, and something that has really done me good.
Yeah. So as a cutman, your job is to wrap the fighters' hands, look after the fighters during the fight, look after their cuts, make sure that they can survive that one more round, and keep going throughout the fight. What would you say is like your favorite part of that, of all that process?
All that process, everything. You know,
Everything.
that's nice, because like yesterday we had the weigh-ins for tonight's fights, and you know, these are fighters I haven't never met before, and what happens is Top Rank will give them the offer if they have their own cutman, which 98% of them don't, right? But they get to choose whether they want me or Mike Bazo, and of course a lot of them want me. But I'm talking to this kid, he's from Canada. I'm talking to his opponent, not knowing that they were fighting each other, just shooting the shit, right? So then I go and introduce myself to this kid, and the first thing he stands up and he says, "Hey, man, well, you know, I saw you talking to that other guy. How friendly are you with him?" And I start laughing. I said, "Man," I said, "you know, I can tell you're still a rookie in what you do, but you have to understand our position is we're here to take care of you. You know, to me, I have no favorites, but if you pick me, I'm going to give you 150%. I said, but I put my arm around him. I said, "Yeah, but I understand. I understand the mentality of a fighter. You know, you're talking to this guy, but you're going to be working with me. You know," but I said, "Nah, you know, we don't roll that way. You know, we whoever works with is going to give you 150%. So he understood once of that. But yeah, I'm not, like I told him, like in the UFC or even MMA, there's many times where I could wrap your hands and then work your opponent's corner. You know, but they understand that. You know, and this kid was young, but I put him in check."
Yeah, it's definitely more easy for you to see that in someone, because you've got so many experience with so many different fighters. You know what he's doing already.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, you were talking about that, but I like to get into the fighter's mentality, because like tonight, I think there's 6 fights, and I'm working every fight, different fighters every fight, right? But what I'll do is if I haven't spoken to him, if I didn't speak to him yesterday at the weigh-ins, just kind of get their feelings, I'll sit down with them in the dressing room and let them know what I'm going to do for them, and you know, just kind of encourage them and just kind of get into their mind. But you know, to me at this point, it's I've done so many world title fights, Jake, that's not even the goal anymore. My thing is to work with fighters that are good people, you know. And when I got the call to work with Tyson Fury, you know, I met him literally the last 2 weeks before the fight, but right off the bat, we kicked it off like brothers, and the whole team that he had with him, you know. So those are the kind of things, those are the kind of people I like working with, because I'm going to work fights, but I don't give a shit if it's a title fight or not. The personality of a person is what makes it for me.
Definitely. So when you're wrapping people's hands, obviously you said you've been in the game for like 30 years now. How many hands would you say you've wrapped? Because I can imagine it's thousands.
Thousands, yeah, that's thousands, man. You know, I don't count hands wrapped. I don't count world championship fights no more, because they're unbelievable. I don't know. You know, what I've always done is, let's say I'm in your hometown, and we got a show there, and a lot of the fans, when I was with the UFC, I'd do this all the time. A lot of the fans would always go to the hotel before and after the fights. So I would always pick a fan out from the audience and wrap his hands in front of everybody in the lobby, and then I would cut it off and I would give it to him. So I've done a shitload of those, and they all got their hands wrapped by Stitch, you know. So yeah, that's how I always try to give back, and that's what makes this job fun. You know, working the fights is one thing, but what happens outside of that is the best thing.
Okay, I'm just going to move the laptop quickly because there's the internet connection. So what would you say is the difference between wrapping a boxer's gloves and a martial artist gloves? Because obviously there's grappling involved, but is there any difference in between the boxing and the MMA wraps?
Really, no. You know, the same technique I use in boxing, I use for MMA guys,
Yeah.
because the main object of wrapping your hands is so you don't break. But with MMA, it's the same technique. We just don't put the extra gauze. You know, in boxing, you have like this much gauze, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, in MMA, there, because of the size of the gloves, but I'll ask the guys, the old famous, Do you want the knockout wrap or the tap out wrap? And people always ask me, what's the difference? Well, the knockout wrap is for you're going to secure all the metacarpals, all the bones. The tap out wrap will give a little bit more flexibility. Like a lot of the Brazilians don't like their thumb attached, but I'll explain to them that it's important to have your thumb wrapped also, because it anchors everything else. But I could wrap it in a form where you can still grapple and protect your hands. So basically they're the same, except for the padding.
Yeah. And obviously we've mentioned, you've wrapped so many hands and worked on so many people. Who's the biggest hands you've ever wrapped?
Well, biggest hands had to be Brock Lesnar.
Okay.
And the thing about it is they had, when he fought Shane and Carwin, they both had humongous hands. But I was working with Brock Lesnar, so I got to wrap him. But they made special gloves, 4X gloves for these guys. And when I was working with with Brock Lesnar, I'm putting his gloves on, and they rip. His hands are so big, they just ripped. And Burt Watson, that was our coordinator, saying, Stitch, what are we going to do? We only have 2 pair of gloves. So I remember working with the Klitschko brothers. They would put Vaseline on their hand wrap and then slide the glove in, and that's what I did with Brock Lesnar on the second pair, the only pair that we had left, and they went in, and of course I had him sign the glove that he ripped. It was like the Hulk. It blew my mind. I said, shit, Brock, I'm over here putting it in, and it just goes like that. And I said, okay. So anyway, I have that pair, and he signed for me. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's real.
And what would you say about who had the smallest hands that you've wrapped?
Well, I've worked with a lot of girls in obviously boxing, but Invicta and MMA. Man, when I first started wrapping girls' hands, they were like wrapping little kids' hands, right? But I learned, just you have to, when you wrap a hand, you have to know how much gauze and tape to use to make it comfortable for that person. Well, with the girls, I would normally use maybe a half, no more than 3/4 of a roll of gauze. Their hands were that small. But yeah, the girls' small hands.
And how much gauze would you use on Brock Lesnar, for example?
I usually like a roll and a half. Yeah, maybe with the extra padding, maybe as much as 2.
Quite a big difference to the women, then.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, big difference. Yeah.
And what was it like? Obviously, when you're wrapping their hands, it's quite an intimate moment. You're sat there before they're going to go to war with someone or have a fight with someone. And what is that moment like with the fighters? Because I can imagine you get quite a different range of emotions.
Good point, man. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I've had fighters cry. I've had fighters laugh and play and joke around, and but those are the moments that are real important, because as Frank Mir says, he says, when I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, my stomach just drops because I know it's time to fight. And I am that guy. Once I walk in the dressing room, and like I tell them, these are like the gladiator days in the old days. I walk into the dungeon, I put all the armor on you, and I send you out to the arena to fight for death. Well, here I'm putting your hand wraps on. But I give these guys a lot of confidence. Like say this, I've had guys that cried, but I understand. And, this one guy, a big name in the UFC, started crying, and I just sat back and let him finish, get his emotions out. And then that's when I start psychologically letting them know that don't worry about anything. I'm gonna take care of you, and they end up giving me a hug and give me a kiss and tell me they love me, but yeah, there's guys that sit around and just do nothing. And one of my great stories is Fedor Emelianenko. We all know who Fedor is, right?
Yeah,
the legend. So I used to go to Japan with Josh Barnett to work his fight. He would pay me specifically to go with him, but a lot of guys would want me to wrap their hands. And Josh says, I'm paying him to come work with me. If you want him to wrap your hands, $500. Man, I'd make 2,000-3,000 easy right in one night. And because wrapping hands to me in 15 minutes, I'm in and out. So I get the promoter comes in and asks me if I could wrap Fedor Emelianenko's hands in Pride in Japan. Of course, it's mega big, and I didn't even question, didn't ask about money or nothing, but I get in the dressing room and you know, being that I've worked with the Klitschko's, I've worked with a lot of Eastern European fighters, and I know they're quiet. Their personality is different than yours and different than mine. They're more stoic. While Fedor, I'm wrapping his hands, and he had just come back from breaking his thumb. I think that's why they made him break his or wrap his hands, because he was just first fight back from an injury. And so I'm wrapping his hands, and he ain't saying shit to me, you know, and open and close and open and close. And finally I finished. I said, okay. I said, Fedor, how do they feel? He goes, super, super. Bro, that's all he said, man. I walked out. I was on top of the world, and, you know, I was ecstatic. And just to top it off that night is Josh and I are walking back to the bus down the hallway after the fights, and he had just won. I think he fought Mark Hunt, if I'm not mistaken. But he sees Josh and I, and he invites us into the dressing room, and, you know, Plasiba, thank you. And we take shots of vodka with Fedor Emelianenko. And after that, I was the only one to wrap his hands, him and his brother Alexander. So great stories. And the last time I worked with Fedor was Bellator in San Jose. And I see him in the lobby. I just come in from the airport, and he comes up to me and gives me a hug. And this is a Russian guy giving me a hug, right? So it's just not normal, you know, or not often, I should say. But he says, I have a sweatsuit for you. So he sent a guy up to his room and came back, and I had the team sweatsuit with Stitch in the front and Stitch in the back. But what makes that special, Jake, is that those outfits were made when he was in Russia. So he thought about me when he was in Russia, and that's what makes that special. Yeah. See, that's the stories I got like this with so many fighters.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's great to know that the fighters don't just forget about you, and they appreciate what you do for them. And obviously with you, you know all the little, you've learned the tricks and everything over the years that you've been doing it, and you can make the fighters feel more comfortable by wrapping their hands in a certain way. And that's great for you to get the feedback from the fighters, and also like gifts from you being that kind of guy. They treat you the same way, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, it's great, man. I mean, I've gotten sweats from Lyoto Machida, and, you know, Tito Ortiz made a shirt with my name on it, and, you know, just I mean, it's unbelievable, you know, and it's what makes my job fun.
Yeah. And obviously we spoke about what you do before the fight, and obviously when you're in the cage, your job is to make sure they can make the next round. But what sort of things do you say to them, if you say anything?
Yeah, well, you know, I'll sit down like tonight. I'll get into the dressing room and we'll go from square one, right? So I'll sit down with them, and I'll sit down with the team, being that this is the first time I'm working with them, and I'll say, look, I like to work on the right side of the ring, on the apron, right? So let me work on the right side and just give me his face. Mm-hmm. And you guys take everything else. You guys, who handles the mouthpiece, who handles the water, who handles the stool, who's going to wipe down? Yeah, that's you guys. Just give me his face, and then I'll talk to the fighter. And I said, look, Jake, man, I'm here to take care of you like you're my son. You know, if you're going to be in the heat of battle, I'm probably going to keep ice on you. I do a lot of preventive maintenance. So I'll keep ice on you. I'll keep the ends well. You just go out there and kick some ass, you know, and that's what I do. And come fight time, that's exactly what I do. You know, my job is not to give instructions, but if I say something, there's probably a lot of truth to it.
Yeah. And what would you say is like the proudest moment in your career? Because you've had a long career, but I don't know if you can even choose one, to be honest. But
yeah, it's too many, man. But I'll give you one for MMA, and I'll give you one for boxing. How's that?
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
So with boxing, you know, working with Tyson Fury was awesome. It was a great experience. But the fight before that with Vladimir Klitschko, Anthony Joshua, Wembley Stadium, right? Of course, I've been with Vladimir Klitschko for like 12 years. And so I didn't get to London until Thursday, because my daughter had gotten married in the island of Crete on Wednesday. So go to the wedding, and of course we celebrate. And Thursday morning I fly to London, and I'm staying at the Hilton right across from Wembley. Great seat. You know, I'd look at Wembley and I think, wow, I'm here. But Vladimir's staying in an apartment, so I don't see him till the weigh-ins. And being that I've been with him for so many years, he has a lot of confidence in me. So I'll sit down with him and his brother Vitaly, and we'll go over the game plan, how you feeling, and any issues, any problems. We go through all these details. But with Vladimir, at the end, before he got on the scale at the weigh-ins, I put my arm on his shoulder, and I said, look, Vladimir, and I look at him, don't worry about nothing tomorrow. I'm going to take care of you like you're my son. Psychologically, that's what I want to put on him.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, man, in front of 90,000 people, bro. 90,000 Brits is like 150 anybody else. It was loud. It was so loud, and it was just buzzing, right? The excitement of being there. So I'm putting the final Vaseline on Vladimir right before Michael Buffer does the announcements, and we're about this far apart. You figure I'm working on him, and he says, between him and I, he says, you could call me son.
Wow.
But that gave me chills, man, because I knew, a fighter, when they're in their room the night before a fight, they can't sleep. Their nerves are going, and all these things are going through their mind. But I took that away from Vladimir, knowing that I was going to take care of him, and turned out to be one of the greatest heavyweight fights in the history of heavyweights, and definitely in the current times.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. MMA, Vanderlei Silva, Chuck Liddell. Never forget this fight. That was December the 29th, and I know because that was my birthday. But and I worked with Chuck Liddell in that corner. But the week before, Vanderlei, I've always seen him at the gyms and all that. And karma, like say, psychology is a big thing for me, Jake. Mm-hmm. And I tell Vanderlei, because I'd known Vanderlei since the days in Pride in Japan. And I thought he was a beast then, and he was a beast, right? So him and Shogun and Ninja, Shogun's brother, and Verdun gave me the nickname Santana, Carlos Santana, right? So we had a good friendship, but I tell Vanderlei, I said, look, Vanderlei, good luck next week. That's my birthday, man, so I want to give you some good karma. And I leave, So here he is, man. That fight has to be one of my top 3 fights in MMA history that were magnificent. I mean, I could just hear those punches, and I'm working Chuck's corner, and he gets cut, and of course I clean him up after the fight. But after the fight, I work on him. Then I go check on Vanderlei Silva, and Leon Tabbs, the original UFC Cutman, is working on him, and his face is all swollen. Hey, Vanderlei, how you feeling? No, Stitch, I'm okay, Stitch. And then he says, Stitch, happy birthday. I said, man, what insane. He remembered from that week before. And right in the heart of his hardest battle, he wished me a happy birthday. How can you not enjoy it?
That's crazy. The fact that he thought of it after having a fight with someone that is literally life and death sometimes is amazing, that he can still bring up the fact that it's your birthday.
That was it. That was what was mind blowing, is that they were in a battle, bro. I'm telling you, and they're just cracking each other, and nobody's going down, and and it was. I have a feeling, and even Lyoto Machida. The thing that I use often is, I'm gonna treat you like you're my son, came from Lyoto Machida, because when he beat Rashad Evans for the world title, I worked with him, and but I always work with Machida. But his father, if you remember, his father is a very proud Japanese man. He just sits there very shogunnish, right? And so I go to the dressing room after the fights and to congratulate him. And in front of his father, and his father just like this, very, very proud. He says, Stitch, in the ring, you are my father, right? And I said, wow, man, that to me, like that was an honor, and that's something that I know it meant a lot to him, and there's a lot of truth. So I use that to kind of entice you to go out there and kick some ass.
I guess that's sort of the highest praise you can get from the fighter, because you are looking after them like they are your son. You are preparing them every round to go back out there and do the best they can every round. So it is like you are their father, and I understand that completely from your both points.
Yeah, of course. Even Carol Parisian, I mean, early in the UFCs, he ended up with a big old cut, man, and I kept him in the game, and he ended up winning. And so I see him months later at a UFC in Las Vegas, and he's sitting there with his father. And so I go and I say hi to him and all that, and his father looks at me, and he says, thank you for taking care of my son. And they're Armenian, right, from Los Angeles, and I live here in Las Vegas. He goes, I want to invite you to my house for dinner, right? And that really touched me, because I know I wasn't going to go to dinner. We live in different places, but him to offer himself to me that way for taking care of his son, that meant everything to me, and it's the pretty awesome feelings, bro.
Yeah, I can imagine. And going back a bit to the Anthony Joshua Vladimir Klitschko fight, How was it for you? Like, what was the pressure like going out there with 90,000 fans, like you say, British fans as well, that sound absolutely like unreal compared to even just 90,000 fans sound like 150,000 fans, like you said. Do you feel the
Yeah.
pressure of that?
Well, yeah, there's, well, it's control pressure, and I guess that's the adrenaline. That's what we work for. But I've done so many of these that mechanically, everything remains the same. Continuously you do the same. But the adrenaline, that's what's a mind blower. Like I say, when we walked out, the fans were going crazy. When Anthony Joshua walked out, the fans went really crazy. But then I'm on the flip side, because working with Tyson Fury, with Deontay Wilder, I went through the same emotions. It's just that Tyson Fury was the fan favorite. And when he walked out, number one, it blew my mind, because we're in the dressing room and they're putting his robe on and they're putting his crown on. And that's all I see. So then it's, all right, guys, it's time for us to walk. So I didn't know how his ring walk was going to continue. But they tell us, the coaches, the team, you guys wait for him up in the ring. Man, I tell you what, Jake, when I saw him coming through the chute and he's being carried on a crown, a throne, I should say, I started laughing, man. I said, oh, shit. I've seen everything, but I've never seen something like that. Talk about a grand entry, So those are the things, yeah, those are the fun things in life, man.
And what was it like that working with Tyson? Obviously, being in the changing rooms before, he always looks like such a calm person when he's fighting, before he's fighting, after he's fighting. Is it the same sort of thing in the changing rooms?
Yeah. That's it's just the way he was, And keep in mind, I worked with Vladimir Klitschko when he fought Anthony Joshua, and I think we all thought it was going to be an easy fight. Yeah, I think maybe we kind of underestimated him. And I told him, I said, man, when I saw you, I just thought I was going to have an easy night, But his style of fighting is what makes it extremely, extremely difficult, because you can't teach that style of fighting. So when I met him, because I got calls from Bob Arum, Top Rank, and I got calls from other people that were telling me that they were talking about using me with Tyson Fury, and of course, that's a big honor. But when I get to the gym, he's there. He had just gotten there, and he puts his hand out right off the bat and says, welcome to the team. And the first thing we start doing is talking about the cuts, because he had two of them. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I let him know that this is how I'm going to work with you. I'll do preventive maintenance every round. I'm not going to wait till something happens. And then, so we go through that, and then I say, you know what, Tyson, because I work with sponsors. One of the reasons I'm not with the UFC no more is because of the sponsor deal, right? Well, I had sponsors, and I said, look, I have my own outfit. You're talking about one more round. That's a company that teamed up with me again. And I said, I have a company, one more round. Do you mind if I make a cornerman jacket like yours and put my sponsors on it? And he puts his hand on me and says, Stitch, you could do whatever you want. I mean, I was that kind of guy, And so you look at the fights, the cornerman jacket I have has my sponsors on it. And it has Tyson Fury's logo. But he says, Stitch, the only thing is no gambling or no alcohol. That's fair enough with me, But he's that kind of guy. Super, super good. Super nice guy. And, just the traveler scenario. I like to delve into their, how are people created to get to this point where we're at here? We've all taken long journeys. I like to get into those journeys and find out how you got here as a fighter, how you got here as a reporter. Those are what makes the conversations interesting. And he's had a crazy life.
Yeah, of course he has. And what was it like being part of that that event? What was the magnitude of that event compared to previous events that you've worked?
Yeah, that was that definitely fell up there. That's top 5 for sure. But the thing that it happened, the way it happened is under the scenario of him getting cut the time before. So I guess I kind of represented the cutmen. That was a good time for the cutmen to be recognized for the jobs that we do. We're kind of like the quiet soldiers, behind the scenes, and when we do our work, a lot of them don't go notice. But then you get an event like Tyson Fury where, it could determine the guy's career. So for me to have gotten called to do work his cuts was awesome. And, and he puts out on Twitter, I want to welcome Stitch to, Team Tyson, got the best cut man in the world, Man, doesn't get much better than that.
No, of course. And obviously with that fight, Deontay Wilder walked out with quite a bit of a costume, would I say? And he was kind of making excuses afterwards, saying that it was weighing him down and made his legs feel really heavy and whatnot. What did you think about all that?
I thought it was bullshit. Fighters, whenever they lose, they always find a reason why they lost, right? Mm-hmm. And he got beat. He plain and simply got beat. But I had told people before, I said, Deontay Wilder, based on the last fight and what I've seen with Klitschko and others, Deontay Wilder has one way of winning. That's by knockout. Tyson Fury has two ways of winning. That's by decision or knockout. And I said, if he gets the decision, it's going to be unanimous. But during the fight, I think up around the fifth round, we're working on him. And I tell him in Sugar Hill, I said, man, they're going to stop the fight, down the road. It's getting that close to, the type of, you got to consider also, Jake, the type of shots that Deontay Wilder were taking were what we call long-term injury shots, where it could affect the brain down the road and, but the body. And Tyson Fury's punches are like Chuck Liddell's punches, where they penetrate and they go through here and they'll come out back there. Those are direct, hard shots. And Deontay Wilder was receiving those kind of shots. So it took a lot for his corner to stop it, but they did the right thing. And they were talking about the rematch. And I said, it's crazy time to do a rematch because he'd get beat. What do they call it? The gun shy. You got to be careful on how he's going to respond when he gets hit again. So we'll see. But a lot of props to Tyson Fury.
Yeah. And obviously with you working with Vladimir Klitschko against Anthony Joshua, Vladimir Klitschko against Tyson Fury, and now working with Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder, there's talk about the Joshua and Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury fight happening in the future. What would you think about that matchup?
Once again, Tyson Fury's style is his biggest asset. His unpredictable, literally unpredictable. He ain't got no style, but that's what makes it so difficult. But he has the heart of a lion to go out there and fling punches, and he connects them, and so you can't teach that. And I'm looking at him the final 2 weeks that I'm in camp with him. I'm there and I'm working his corner as he's sparring. But everything that he did in the gym, Jake, he did during the fight with Deontay Wilder. So I knew he was going to whoop the shit out of him. But very, very unpredictable. You can't teach that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely it's very hard for some people to do something in the gym and it doesn't always translate into a fight because it's hard to remember the stuff that you've done in the gym when you're getting punched in the face.
But he does understand the solid basics of boxing. That I gave him. He's astute with boxing, but yeah, you're not gonna see another Floyd Mayweather style. You're not gonna see another Tyson Fury style because it's made for one person.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing I love about Tyson as well is his movement, how he always finds a way to get out of the way. And it's unbelievable watching it because you're thinking, how can someone that big and that tall move like that?
Yeah, it's like trying to grab water.
Yeah.
You have it here, but it's not there, right? And that's the way he is, very, very unpredictable. And he can take shots. So he's not the prettiest heavyweight in the history of the heavyweights, but he's definitely effective.
Mm-hmm. And obviously we mentioned about the cut in the previous fights, the Deontay Wilder fight. Is obviously the Cutman did really well in that. Is there anything that you would have done differently to help with that cut?
Yeah, Jorge Capetillo is a good friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he's here. He has a fighter fighting tonight. But when and I always study Cutman, right? And but Jorge was put in a position where he wasn't 100% programmed for, right? Mm-hmm. To work on a major cut like that during that type of fight. So some of the things that he did, a lot of things correct. Of course, he definitely saved the fight, but there was things that he could have done better. So like 3 days after the fight, I met with him and we went and had lunch and I said, look, I want to sit down with you and let's go over what you did, because some things you did right, but some things you could improve on, because on the next fight, and that's before I knew I was going to get called, on the next fight, all eyes are going to be on you. As it was with the Tyson Fury fight, you literally, number one, you made the Mexicans proud, because we're Mexicans, right? But you also brought out the importance of being a good cut man.
Mm-hmm.
And so that people are going to watch you, and they're going to look for little areas of imperfections. So I want to show you how you did. Here's how you got to do it. So I went through that, and then turns out that Jorge Capetillo is one of the guys that recommended me to Tyson Fury, because he said, like, he said, hey man, in this kind of position, and I respect him for that because he was truthful. In this kind of position, it's more important. Stitch has more experience than I do. And that's how they brought me in. But respect to Tyson Fury, because he kept Jorge Capetillo with the team, and we worked the corner together. So that's how all that transpired, and very few people know about that. So.
And what was it like in your career? Is there any moments that you've thought, like, maybe you've been watching a fight and thought, like, oh, I wish I was there to deal with that cut or something like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's been many, many times. We were talking about it last night, how the boxing cutmen are different than MMA cutmen. All right. And when I was learning to be a cutman, it was only boxing. And I asked this one guy, he did a good job in the corner working on a cut. Told him I was trying to learn to be a cutman, and can you tell me what you did? And at that time, boxing was a secret thing, right? He says, hey, fuck you. He goes, I'm taking this to my grave, and you got like me. And he walked away. But at that point, I knew I didn't want to be like this guy. And I mean, I felt about this big, Jake. And so my job has always been to educate now, being a martial artist, being a cutman, but always giving back. But if you notice in MMA, how the cutmen have gloves, they have the wrist wrap with the swabs, so you don't put them in your mouth, you don't put them in your ear. They put the Vaseline here on their hand. They use it like an artist. They'll have a wet towel. All those are techniques that I established, but they work. So MMA guys, cutmen, are smart enough to say, if it works with Stitch, it's going to work with me. Well, boxing, on the other hand, are a little bit more boneheaded. As a matter of fact, I was looking at a fight on The Zone. I think it was last week's fight. The girls were fighting, and the cut man had his mask, but his mask was down here, and he had a shield covering it, but then he had a swab in his mouth. I said, oh shit, I couldn't believe that. My daughter sent me that picture, and that's the difference between boxing cutmen and MMA cutmen. They, a lot of cutmen, Jake, well, a lot of wannabe cutmen want to be recognized as being cutmen not through their performance, but through their appearance. Mm-hmm. The swab here, the swabs here. To me, that's filthy, because that goes into an open wound. No gloves, so there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah, it's definitely better to obviously keep things away from your mouth and away from your ears or anything that's got any germs on it, really, especially dealing with open wounds.
Pretty common sense,
mm-hmm.
Right? So yeah. As a matter of fact, I was telling a story yesterday. Vladimir Klitschko fought Madison Square Garden in New York, right? So I get into the dressing room, and I'm on my knees. I open up my bag, and I'm pulling my stuff out. And this old man behind me, didn't know where he came from or who he was to this day, but he said, LA is your town. New York is my town. And I look at him, and I said, well, I'm from Las Vegas. But then I'm thinking, what was this? This came up to me like I'm pissing on his parade or something like that, and tells me this is my town. Well, who cares, But that's boxing as it is.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, let me add one more thing, even to not only MMA cutmen, boxing cutmen, even trainers. Combat sports are the only A-level fight to do what we do and be called professionals. If you're some kind of athletic trainer, you go to school, you get certified. All we need is a license, and we're considered professionals.
Okay. So that was one of the questions.
You know that, huh?
I didn't know that. No, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Is like, what's the route into being a cutman? Are you back?
Yeah, you're coming in broken.
Right. Am I back? We're good.
Think it might be all right? No, it's still frozen. There we go.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll repeat the question. So, what is like the route into being a cutman?
What's the what? I'm sorry.
What's the route into actually being a cutman and becoming a cutman?
Well, you know, I get emails, I get messages all the time. Everybody do right, and you know, I'm probably one of the few handful of cutmen that could say we could do this full time. But I mean, I get doctors, paramedics, nurses, EMTs, housewives, everybody. What's it take to be a cutman? I just got one the other day. But I tell them, I said, look, you got to spend hours and days and weeks and months and years in the gym working as a fighter, working with the fighters, donating your time, wrapping hands at your cost, you know, getting their confidence. You just can't, because you're a doctor or a nurse or anything like, you just can't come in and start working, wrapping hands and working cuts unless you know what goes on behind the scenes. And the only reason for you to the only way you're going to know what goes on behind the scenes is to be there,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I kind of put them that way, you know. I did a fight here at Top Rank last weekend, and they brought me in to be the guy's cut man. So I go to the team, like I said earlier, and I'll explain to him my situation. And the guy says, older man, said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I thought you guys wanted me to be a cut man. He goes, no, I'm going to be the cut man. I said, okay, shit, that's fine with me. I said, what do you have? He says, oh, no, I just have Vaseline. I said, well, you know, unfortunately, I'm not going to get into a discussion because it's his team, but that's the bad approach to taking care of a young fighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. When it's your job to look after them, you know, like a certain cut could ruin your career or ruin the next 5 fights because it could be badly handled and then it could reopen and whatnot. So it is a bad way to deal, especially with young fighters.
Yeah, of course, 100%, man. And you know, if like Vidal Riley, UK boy, right, that trained KSI. Well, he's also a boxer, and I worked his first professional fight here, and I also worked with him when he trained KSI and Gibb. But I told, and I've been in charge of him. I said, you know, I want to work with you so that you can understand the importance of having a good corner in your team. He had Jeff Mayweather and myself, but that's why I do it. You know, educate these guys. Don't get guys like this old man that just has Vaseline and he's putting your career on his hands, and he ain't got no tools to work with.
Mm-hmm. So, what was it like working that KSI event? Because I believe you worked the second fight with Logan Paul, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, exactly. I did the fight with Logan Paul and did Anson Gibb when he fought Jake Paul, and a whole new world for me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know these guys existed, right? And find out that Logan Paul and KSI, JJ both have like 20 million followers, and to me it was unbelievable, right? So, but nonetheless, I get a call because I had worked with Vidal, number one, and but his manager Amir Abdallah called me and said, "Look, there's this guy KSI that's going to be doing this thing on the zone and what have you not," and he offered me the job and offered me the X amount of money, and it's pretty damn good, you know. So I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So when I met JJ the first time, like I said, I didn't know who he was, and I still don't know too much about his background. But I rapped every day, like Michael B. Jordan when I did Creed. Same thing with KSI. Every day at the gym, we would start off by me rapping his hands. And during those moments is when I would give him the transformation of you going from a YouTube guy, a rapper, to you being a boxer. And I told him, I said, you know, I've never heard your music or anything like that, but here you're a fighter. So this is the mentality that we're going to have as a fighter. So I would always, every day, every day I would always try to give him some kind of advice to put him mentally into our game. And yeah, so he did well. He did very, very well. But it was great because we flew from Las Vegas to LA, and it's like a 30-minute flight in private jet. It's like 7 of us, you know. and we stayed at this grand hotel in Beverly Hills and had our pillowcases that had our initials on them. So, so KSI did have some importance, but I knew it was a different world when I walked into the arena, because normally our system is when we walk into the arena, we put our stuff in the dressing room. The team that's working the corner will go to ringside and we'll evaluate the situation, where the stairs are at, what side I'm working on, what's your side. So we go through all those details. So I'm working out with Vidal Riley and Leon, the conditioning coach. Nobody in the audience knew who I was. They all, hey, Vidal, Vidal. So I knew it was entirely different clientele, but nonetheless, it was fun.
Yeah. And would you compare the professionalism of KSI compared to like an actual like top level elite fighter?
Hey man, props to him. He adjusted well, and there was one time where he was doing the same mistake time after time, and you could see his confidence level going down. Man, Vidal just slapped the shit out of him and scolded him right then and there, and that's maybe what he needed, kind of refocused, right? Mm-hmm. And so he went through all the trials and tribulations of a fighter. He went through all that, being exhausted, getting hurt, training hard and running, and he went through he deserved what he got.
And with like all the events you've worked, is there any event that you wish you would have worked or could have worked?
Well, yeah, I had the offer or the opportunity. Well, shouldn't say the opportunity. I got invited to work Conor McGregor when he fought Floyd Mayweather. Mm-hmm. And tell you how the situation was. So I was in New York, Madison Square Garden, working a Bellator show. I think it was New Year's Eve or some date. So I go in the back dressing room, and John Kavanaugh is there, Conor's coach. Yeah. And I think he's working with Patty Kilpatrick or something like that. So I've known John through the UFC and Conor, of course. So he comes up to me and gives me a hug and said, man, I want to talk to you about working with Conor. I said, yeah, of course. Biggest fight, the media, the promotion, everything is working out great. So he's giving me these details, and I'm asking him questions and what have you not. And he said, all right, Conor's guys will get a hold of me. So they did. They got a hold of me, and the guy I spoke to, the agent, says, John says that you have these dates already booked. Had a show in China, and I had 4 events already booked. And he says, John and Conor want to know if you could cancel those events and be with them in camp every day, wrapping his hands. And such a big event. I said, yeah, of course, I'll cancel. Shit, easy to do. Mm-hmm. But then, I sat with my attorney and we sent him a contract, and very reasonable contract, but they came back real quick and no counter offer or anything, and just said I was too expensive. But the scenario was Conor was going to be training at the UFC Apex Center, at their training facilities. So how would it have looked if I would have been with Conor McGregor, Dana White's ace fighter, working his corner after Dana says Stitch no longer with the UFC? So I knew it became political at that point. And but that was one fight I wish I could have done, because I could have I've done both MMA and boxing, and I know Floyd because I go to his gym every day, every week. So I know Floyd from the get-go. And so I could have helped on that side. But that's what happened.
Yeah. And if there was another crossover event between boxing and MMA, who do you think would be the best people to take part in that event from either side?
Boxing and MMA, I don't know if I want to see it again. I think it's a one-time thing. You got Mike Tyson now talking about fighting Roy Jones in an exhibition, and but no, I don't. No, I mean, if you're gonna box, there's no comparison. You got Jorge Masvidal. You got Nate Diaz that, very Tyson Fury type of style of fighting when it comes to hands. He has no technique. But would I see him? I would see a Nate Diaz with Manny Pacquiao. I think that'd be ideal. Only because Nate Diaz has such a strong following, but he could fight. He used to spar with Andre Ward when they were in the Bay Area. So Nate and Nick could both box. They just box like Tyson Fury with no style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, and I wanted to ask you, one of my favourite fights in the UFC was Robbie Lawler against Rory McDonald too. And that was like an amazing fight. And I'm sure it kept the cutmen busy because there was quite a few cuts in that fight. And obviously Robbie's lip, I'm pretty sure you dealt with Robbie in that fight. So how was it for you dealing with that cut on his lip?
Yeah, I think that was the last biggest UFC fight. We did one the next day. It was like a reality show. But that was my last biggest fight. And I worked with Robbie. But I remember Robbie. I've worked with both of them all the time. But yeah, I got to work with Robbie. What a fight, man.
Mm-hmm.
But Robbie's lip is just split. Like somebody got a knife, just split that lip wide open. And
yeah.
I remember he kind of goes like this and blood spurted out. With today's pandemic, people would be freaking out. But yeah, and the cut was real bad, but it wasn't bad enough to when a judge or a referee or a doctor stops a fight to where it became an unfair advantage. Whenever they stop a fight, Jake, it's because the fighter is at a disadvantage, whether the eye is closed or whether blood is getting into his eye, like Badu Jack when he's doing this,
Mm-hmm.
where there's damage to a nerve. That's when they stop a fight. But a lip looked horrible, but it wasn't going to affect this performance, right? But what a fight, man. These guys went at it, and to me, it was just an honor to have been in that type of fight with those two type of fighters. So, and I saw Robbie the next day because we had that reality show finales, whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
same spot. And they sewn him up, and they did a great job. But let me add with Robbie, like I said, I knew Robbie from way in the back. I've worked his fights all the time. But I was flying to the UK, I think on United one time, and I'm talking to this stewardess, and it turns out to be Robbie Lawler's mother. She goes, "Oh, my son fights, oh, yeah, sure, I've heard that story. Oh, yeah, what's Robbie Lawler?" I said, "No shit. Yeah, I know Robbie well." So, but Robbie knows, he really studies boxing, and he knows a lot of the particulars in boxing and all that. So we've always had conversations. But, yeah, that's one of my top 5 fights by far in history.
Yeah, me too. Because I love the way in that fight they're both just. You can see at the end of the fight they're both just stand there. They've left it all in the octagon. They just the warrior spirit in both of the men just shows so much.
Yeah, and my daughter asked me to send me a text last night about the Shogun and Dan Henderson fight, and I don't know if you remember it, but that was one of the first fights where the UFC went into 5 rounds. Right, so I've been programmed for 3 rounds, and Dan Henderson, and I'm working with Shogun. Dan Henderson and Shogun are doing a Robbie Lawler, Roy McDonald type of fight. They're just blasting each other, and Shogun. I mean, it's a great fight. Shogun comes back after the second round, and he says, one more round, one more round. Yeah, we got one more round. Then I forgot that he was going into a 5-rounder. And I had to tell him, I said, "No, man, you got 2 more rounds, brother." So he had to reprogram himself to go because they were both exhausted. And so that's one of the errors that I made. But I think he lost the decision. But what a fight, man. It's one of those great fights.
Yeah. And then with MMA, I believe you were the second ever cutman in the UFC. And how did it come about for you started to work for the UFC?
Yeah, that's a good point. And very few people bring that up. But Leon Taz was the legendary cutman. I call him the godfather of cutmen in the UFC. But he was there from UFC number 1. So when the Fertittas bought UFC, they brought Leon as a cutman. So I got to give Dana credit. Dana's the one that brought me in. So I got to give him credit for that. But I also got to give him credit as his first major good move that he did was bringing in another cutman, because the sport of MMA is so new that the guys don't know how to wrap hands, they don't know how to work cuts. So for Dana has to have seen that foresight of let's have a cutman on each side was really an ingenious idea. Now everybody's doing it worldwide. We're doing it here in the bubble tonight, but we started that. But it got to the point where we offered to wrap their hands. All right. And like I said, a lot of guys in MMA, such a new sport, don't know how to wrap hands. So we started wrapping hands, and it got to the point where more and more people wanted us to wrap their hands. Me especially. I was doing 7, 8, 9 guys in one night. But it got to the point where it's just overwhelming for us. So we brought in Don House. And Don House is now still the cut man with the UFC. But Burt Watson, Leon Tabbs, Don House, and myself came out with this formula that we use, that the UFC uses now. So we implemented that. And then that's, like I was saying earlier, for the cutmen, they all follow that same system. Well, all these promotions follow the same system of getting the fighters out from the dressing room to the ring, and all that is we established. We put that together. So I got to give Dana credit for that. That he made this game a lot safer. So he brought me in and then took me out.
Yeah, and obviously, like you just said, he eventually got rid of you.
Yeah.
To do with the Reebok deal, obviously you didn't agree with everything that was going on with the pay and all that stuff. And I won't get into it too much, but with the new deal coming in with Venom, do you see anything changing with that, or do you reckon it's going to be the same?
I haven't heard anything. I don't know the details with Venom. It just it's a shame how they just, well, that's how they do it as part of business. They throw Fox under the bus, and they had them, and now they're on ESPN Plus, and they had Reebok, and now they threw them under the bus, and now they're going to negotiate with Venom. But it surprised me with Venom because they were never a big company, and they became a big company, I guess. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think it's still unfair for them not to let these fighters have sponsors, because like I say, for me it was a big idea because I was making more money in sponsors than I was what the UFC was paying. I needed the UFC to make my money, and the same thing with a lot of fighters is they were making a lot more money with sponsors than they were with what they were getting paid, and gave them that opportunity to go ahead and put sponsors on your outfits. It's not going to hurt nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And obviously, if anything ever changes with that, with the deal and the payment and stuff like that, would you ever work again for the UFC, or could you not see it happening?
Well, everything's always possible. I'd have to definitely sit down. It'd definitely be under totally different circumstances. Because like I said, I'm working the bare knuckle fights now, and I was with Bellator and the Professional Fight League, and Pride in Japan. And once I left the UFC, my value went up because they wanted me. So it would have to be under different circumstances. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, bro. And people ask me, well, what do you think? Do you miss it? I said, no, I don't miss it at all. And the question was asked just yesterday, what have you seen Dana? I said, no, I haven't seen Dana. Well, what would you say if you saw him? I said, shit, I'd shake his hand and thank him for letting me go, because it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I became, I don't know if you want to call it the face of the rebellion or the face of speaking out, but all over the world, people will stop me, Jake, and thank me for speaking out. And when I did Creed, I went to the premiere, and after the premiere, we have a party, and Wesley Snipes comes up to me, and first thing he says is, hey, man, the UFC did you wrong. So that I know I have that respect factor for speaking out about the right things to do for these guys, because these guys are athletes, man. And I always tell the fighters, nothing could be done without you guys. You can't have a promotion. You can't have a manager. You can't have a trainer or a cutman unless you fight. So you are the product, and you should be rewarded according to that.
Yeah, definitely. So that's all the questions I've got for you, Stitch.
All right. Good questions, bro.